Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Shailene and in today's video I'm going to talk about the top 20 books I want to read in 2020. Last year when I did this video and looking back on the books that I read from that list, I did not do so well. So I don't know how this year's gonna go, but obviously I'm gonna give it my best and I'm gonna try. So basically the theme of this list this year is books that I have been wanting to read for a very long time, but I've just never gotten around to reading. That's kind of the theme. I guess without further ado, let's just jump right on into the video. So number 20 is Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. Now obviously there's a pretty chunky reason why I haven't read this book yet. This book is huge. It's gigantic. And I've already seen the TV mini-series for this, so yeah. Reading the book just seems like a lot. How many pages is this actually? This is 564 pages. It just looks like so much more. But yeah, lots of pages. So this is a story about a girl in 1843. Grace Marks is accused and convicted of killing her employer, his mistress, and his housekeeper. Some believe that Grace is innocent, others believe that she's either evil or insane. So now Grace is serving a life sentence and she claims to have no memory of the murders. So an up-and-coming expert in the field of mental illness is recruited by a group of reformers and spiritualists who seek to pardon Grace of her horrible crimes. Grace tells him her story while bringing them closer to the day that she committed the murders, in which she cannot remember. So that's basically the gist of the book. I already kind of know what happens, but I mean, I just really want to read the book also. So hopefully I'll get to it this year at some point. It's just so huge that like I'm nervous to start it. So number 19 is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. So this is about a woman. She's a lady's maid and she basically meets this very rich man. She gets swept off her feet by him. They go to his sprawling country estate. They get married. She moves in, but the presence of her husband's dead wife is emanating throughout the entire house and kind of haunts her, and it's threatening to ruin their marriage. So it's a gothic kind of horror ghost story. I'm not entirely sure if it's a ghost story. I meant to read this in October, but I just didn't get around to it, so hopefully I'll get to it this year. This is a book that I definitely really do want to read, so it's definitely high on my list to read. So number 18 is the Book of Negroes by Lawrence Hill. This is also another book that I've seen the mini-series to. This is actually on CBC Canada like ages ago. So I definitely want to reread this book and watch the series again at some point. So this is based on a true story. We follow Anita. She is abducted from her home in Mali when she is 11 years old. She is sent to South Carolina where she is sold into slavery to a plantation. She is then moved to New York where she escapes her owner, and she helps during the Revolutionary War by recording all of the freed slaves on the British side into this book, which is called the Book of Negroes. She's then sent to Nova Scotia, my home province, where she's reeling from the loss of her 2 children and being separated from her lover. So she then joins a group of freed slaves who make the journey back to Africa, but she ends up in London as a pretty iconic and famous abolitionist. So, I mean, this just sounds like an incredible saga of a book to read, and yeah, it's definitely one that I want to read for Black History Month, and I believe Black History Month is in February, so you'll probably see this in a wrap-up at some point. Number 17 is The Golden Mean by Annabel Lyon. So, I've had this book on my TBR for like ages. You guys know that I love books set in ancient times, like ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, so yeah. I've been wanting to get to this forever. It's just the cover is really striking as well. It's very beautiful. So this is a historical fiction novel following Aristotle as he tutors Alexander, who then goes on to become Alexander the Great. So it just seems like a very fascinating tale. I'm excited to pick this one up and get to it. It's actually quite short, so I should fly through this. Number 16 is another chunker, and one I've had on my shelves sitting for a few years now, but the size of it is literally terrifying. So this is The Rise and Fall of Ancient Egypt by Toby Wilkinson. So this is a non-fiction book, well, about Egypt. It's pretty self-explanatory. It goes through all of the periods in ancient Egypt. All the pharaohs, all the knowledge is held in this book. But yeah, this is nearly, without the bibliography, I think this is 400, nearly 500 pages. Yeah, see, this is like 486 pages without the bibliography and index. That's all the bibliography and index, and that's the whole book. But the writing is sort of small and the pages are very thin. So this is just huge. It's gigantic, and yeah, I'm scared to pick this up because I feel like this is a book that I'm just going to be reading forever and ever and ever, but I just need to do it. I'll probably read this at some time during the summer, most likely. So number 15 is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is another book that I had intended to read in 2019, but I just didn't get to it in time. This is basically following a classics professor and a group of classics students, I believe. They're basically a bunch of misfits. They discover a different way of thinking. They go beyond the boundaries of normal morality. And there's a murder that takes place. So yeah, a lot of people have mixed opinions on this book, but I want to read it for myself and see what it's about. It's also another one of the big books, so tiny bit terrified to pick it up because it's so big, but yeah. Another Donna Tartt book that I want to read, obviously, is The Goldfinch. They've made a movie out of it. I want to see the movie, so I have to read the book first. Just kind of how it goes. Honestly, I don't know what this book is about at all. Like, I really don't know anything. But it seems interesting. It seems like one of those books that, like, almost everybody has read or everybody has it on their list and they intend to read it. So, yeah, I actually do want to read this at some point. Number 13 is Shark Life by Peter Benchley. Peter Benchley was the man who wrote Jaws, and, well, we've all seen what that has done to sharks and people's fear of sharks. So this book has been sitting on my shelves for nearly 15 years now. Like, I've had this since I was a kid, but I've never really picked it up and read it. This year is going to be the year that I pick up and read this book. Basically, this is a bunch of anecdotes of Peter Benchley encounters with sharks and how he reacted to them and you know, kind of all that. So yeah, it'll be quick and interesting. Number 12 is The Lost Empire of Atlantis, History's Great Mystery Revealed by Gavin Menzies. So I'm going to be first to admit, this is probably a very pseudoscience book that isn't really based much in science or archaeological evidence, but I have always been very fascinated and very, I guess, entranced by the idea of Atlantis and that there isn't actually an Atlantis out there. So I think this would be an interesting read. I'm not going to take anything to heart and take it as pure fact because it likely isn't. The lost city of Atlantis just seems like amazing, and as someone who loves archaeology, it would just be so cool to actually find Atlantis. Like, it would just be amazing. We found lost cities before, so why can't we find Atlantis? So, you know. But yeah, I just want to read this. It's one that's been on my radar forever, but I've never seen it in the thrift store or anything, and I never really bothered to pick it up. So it's at my library. I'm going to read it. So number 11 is Pretty Girls by Karin Slaughter. So Claire's older sister went missing 20 years ago. Nobody knows what happens to her. There's no note, there's no body. It was never solved and it tore their family apart. So now another girl has disappeared in the same town under very similar circumstances as Claire's older sister. And Claire is convinced that the disappearance of her sister is linked with the other disappearances of the other girls that have gone missing. I have heard so much about this book. I've heard that it's a really great mystery, but I've heard that it's very graphic and quite violent. I am very excited to read this book and pick it up. It's probably going to be one of the first mysteries or thrillers that I end up reading this year, so I'm very excited for it. I have high hopes, and I hope it does not let me down. So number 10 is The Mermaid Chair by Sue Monk Kidd. This is another book that's been on my wanting to read list for like literally ages, and the only reason is because it literally has the word mermaid in the title. I've known about this book for a very long time, and I'm still not even 100% sure what it's even about. So yeah, I mean, I've been wanting to read this for ages. I found it in the thrift store, so of course I'm going to read it. It's actually not that big of a book, like 300 pages, so it's a pretty average sized book. So I think this will be a perfect read for like the beginning of summer. I'm so sorry guys, my camera turned off on me while I was filming and I totally did not realize. So my 9th book that I want to read in 2020 is Water for Elephants by Sara Gruen. So this is a book set in the 1930s during the Great Depression. Jacob is a recently orphaned, he is adrift. He finds himself jumping onto this here passing train, and he ends up joining the circus. And Jacob actually has some experience with being around animals. He is actually a vet, so he ends up taking care of the animals at this here circus. While he's at the circus, he meets Marlena. She is the star of the show of the Equestrian Act, who is married to August, the very cruel circus owner. So this story is basically about star-crossed lovers and a very misunderstood elephant. I've actually saw the movie to this some years ago. I absolutely adored this movie. I loved it so much. I've had the book for so many years, but I just never gotten around to reading it, so this year I definitely want to read it. And number 8 is Brain on Fire, My Month of Madness by Susannah Cahalan. So this is a non-fiction book about Susannah Cahalan and her struggles with a mysterious illness that she was afflicted with for about a month or so. It was originally thought by doctors that she had some sort of strange mental illness, and she was psychotic, and yeah. But Susannah, she knew it wasn't psychosis, she knew she didn't have a mental illness, and her parents were pretty convinced that she did not have a mental illness either. And so, with the help of a incredibly smart doctor and one that was quite attentive, she was able to learn the true cause of her symptoms. So this is a book that I am personally very interested in because of my own struggles with my health and being that patient who is very, misunderstood, who just has a hard time with doctors and the medical system and the way that some doctors treat certain patients with certain medical conditions, i.e. Lyme disease. Like, I feel like my struggles with Lyme will probably be very similar to what Susannah went through. And so I think it's a very interesting novel to read, and it's one that I've been wanting to get to. It's at my library, so it's something that I will definitely be picking up. And number 7 is a book that I've had on my radar for literally so long. I've had this in my Amazon cart to buy. I don't know how many times, but I just never end up buying it. My library, fortunately, has it. So this is Decoding the Heavens, a 2,000-year-old computer, and a century-long search to discover its secrets by Jo Marchant. And this is about the Antikythera mechanism. So this is basically an ancient Greek device that was found at the bottom of the ocean, 100 feet down, and scholars were absolutely puzzled by this hunk of bronze, and it has all these incredible gears, and
they had no idea what it was, and scientists were able to figure out what it was, and they hypothesized that it's one of the world's first computers. Obviously analog. And yeah, they believe that it's a calculator for calculating the movements of the sun, the moon, the planets, and the zodiac. And so, yeah, this book kind of describes the device and how scientists came to figure out what this device was actually meant for and how they came to that conclusion and all the other hypotheses surrounding this device. So yeah, I mean, I've just been wanting to read this for literally ages. I've been so interested about this here weird mechanism. Like, it's just so interesting to me. I've seen it on a documentary quite a few years ago now, and it just, ever since, it interested me so much. So I am very excited to read this finally. I'm so happy that my library has it.
So number 6 is Cure Unknown, Inside the Lyme Epidemic by Pamela Weintraub. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. But basically, this is the whole background story behind Lyme disease, like the politics, the medical side, the science side, the patient side, like everything you can imagine is covered on the basis of Lyme disease in this, and especially chronic Lyme disease, as it is kind of a controversial diagnosis, but hopefully the tides are turning and it won't be like that for much longer, since so many people are getting sick with it. So, didn't know, hey, I have Lyme, I'm sick with it, so I want to read this book so I can hopefully deepen my knowledge on this subject of Lyme disease. I'm quite knowledgeable about it now, but I would like to learn more. Number 5 is Cleopatra A Life by Stacy Schiff. So this is a nonfiction book about, well, Cleopatra and her life and everything we know about her. I've literally been meaning to read this for years. I think I've had this book for almost 10 years now. Probably like 8 or 10 years. I've had it for a very long time and I've just never picked it up. I meant to read it this year, but I just never got to it. I saw shiny new things and I got distracted. But I need to be better at that, and I definitely need to read this year. So number 4 is a big one. I don't even know if this will even fit in the frame. It's a very awkward sized book, but it's a book that I bought because I love the author of this book. I love this person. He sadly died in, I think it was the beginning of 2017. So this is Sharkwater, An Odyssey to Save the Planet by Rob Stewart. This basically contains most of the photos that Rob Stewart took while he was filming his iconic documentary Sharkwater. And not only are there pretty big and a lot of pictures in this book, but there's also quite a bit of reading to go with it. So I hope to read this year, probably in January, I would expect. And, you know, finally read this and probably cry. Because it would be coming up like the 3rd anniversary of Rob's death probably this year, which is just crazy. His death hit me pretty hard when it happened. So yeah, I am looking forward to reading this one. And number 3 is A Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Cowell. So basically, in 1952, an asteroid obliterates the east coast of the United States, taking Washington, D.C. down with it. And the ensuing climate cataclysm will render the Earth inhospitable. This accelerates the effort to colonize space, and so Emma dreams to become the first lady astronaut. So, hi Beast. This book just seems so incredible, and it is something that I'm just so interested in reading. I've been in a big sci-fi mood lately, and I love books with strong female characters, so I'm totally looking forward to reading this. I have it on an ebook. I cannot wait. So, number 2 is Into the Wild by John Krakauer. In April 1992, a young man from a well-to-do family hitchhiked to Alaska and walked alone into the wilderness. His name was Christopher McCandles. He gave all of his life savings to charity, abandoned all of his possessions, all of his money was burned. 4 months later, a party of moose hunters found his decomposed body in the woods. And this is the story of how he came to die in the woods. This became quite a pretty, like, this was a pretty big movie back in 2008. I remember watching it way back then, and I loved the movie. So I've been meaning to find this book in thrift stores for ages, but I've never found it, and it's at my library, so I'm going to read it. Number 1 is Perfume, The Story of a Murderer by Patrick Sunkid. This is a terrifying novel about, well, a murderer, which I don't know much about. The only thing I know about is that it's like a historical fiction novel set in like Paris or something, and he is in the perfume business, and so he kills people and makes perfume out of their sweat glands, which sounds crazy, but I watched a Netflix TV show of the same name. I loved the TV show, and then since I watched that, I've been wanting to read the book, so this is pretty high on my list. I have it at the library. I'm going to read it. So those are the 20 books that I want to get to in 2020. It's a lot of books. There's a lot that I still didn't get to last year that I would like to get to this year, so all those books automatically kind of made it over to, you know, this year, because I still have to read them. A lot of store fiction I did not get to. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, you can go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I'll leave the links to my Instagram, my Goodreads, and my Twitter linked in the description below. And I hope to see you guys next time. Bye!